on there, my friends? This is the Batman, of course, and I've been watching some videos on the Video Response RPG Video Response channel. It's a closed group of like-minded individuals and associates and so on and so forth who discuss all things role-playing, a lot of it from the perspective of a game master. And there's been a topic of the concept of religion in games, how to add them, how to potentially how to come up with a different variant from the existing stuff. I'm looking at it from two perspectives. As a would-be game designer, my own game system, deities are not something that's in the mechanics. They have no influence. Religion has no. Let's be specific here. Religion, in my view, and the gods. The gods themselves have no mechanics in the game. There are no provisions for interactions of a divine nature or influence or anything of that nature. It is possible inside the game, in the game story, crafted and created by the individual players, to have gods in their own version. So my friend Shannon created his house, House Hatheon, which is based off of a very extensive backstory of a human avian crossbreed, specifically genetically designed to be called aviaries, that they have a religion. And their religion is twofold. One is a form of ancestor worship or ancestor appreciation, where they pay homage to the forebears of their family lines. And the other is this belief in a pantheon of gods, good, bad, and indifferent, who are vaguely tied into the creators of their species, of their genetic race, that the scientists in a laboratory that crafted them and designed them so influenced the original aviaries that it's carried over into a mythology of sorts that's quite deeply ingrained in them, almost to the point of it being a religion. So that's based off of a player's take for his house and his genetic people. So it's unique to to the aviaries in general. But that's not to say that there aren't others. There's another alien race called the Catarans that are basically a feline-based feline-based genome that has its own take on a religion. So, like pretty much any intellectual species, at some point there's enough stuff going on that we think of the need for some sort of religion. But this is in a story-based concept, not in the game itself, not in the mechanics. Now, in the game mechanics, also an alternate form of part of the story are these entities called cults. And in the 8,000 years in the future, in the premise of the game system, that any organized religion, any fanatical sidebar, whatever you want to call it, it gets all lumped together as a cult. And some are benign, some are extremely dangerous, some of them are capable, some of them are even potentially devastating to any whatever's to get in their way. The One True Path comes to mind. It is a big foe of House Hatheon, in part because these are purest humans who believe that any diversion from the original genetic divine plan for humanity is an aberration and needs to be destroyed. That somehow they're weakening the human bloodlines by allowing all this genetic manipulation that's taken place over the millennia, that's populated the game world, or the game universe, with its version of alien or near alien races, when most of the so-called alien races out there are actually human genetic manipulations. So we wanted a super soldier, we did this and we did that, and some worked and some didn't, some failed, some were successful. We needed to alter genetics for certain for certain types of planet ecologies. That way the humans would survive there better, etc., etc. And then thousands of years of reproduction and natural evolution after the artificial divergence takes place. So now we're looking at religion from that perspective. And then I look at religion from what I know growing up playing in the RPGs and playing in role-playing games since I was a kid. Only a handful of the game systems that I have on my shelf actually have the gods and goddesses and an established religion where it's to the point where you can interact with it to some degree in the game. Star Wars does not. BattleTech does not. Shadowrun does not. The biggest ones do is the fantasy settings, because fantasy, demons and devils, gods and angels, all this stuff, it falls within the fanciful realm to some degree. So it's natural for them to be tied into fantasy-based settings. So when the earliest versions of D&D had allusions to, you picked a religion based on your alignment. If you were a cleric, you had a cleric, and then you had an alignment, and then you had a choice between this deity and that deity, and that would be your quote deity. And you may or may not get something out of it, but in the various earliest sense of the word, there wasn't a whole lot of mechanics for it. It wasn't until first generation that Advanced Dungeons & Dragons came out, and then second edition, etc., that we've seen an expanding era of bringing religion into the role-playing game, to the point where they created a source book called Deities and Demigods. I remember when I got my first copy of that. I got that just prior to the Satanic Panic breaking out, and it was that one book, along with the cover of my original issue of Dungeons AD&D DM guide that had the red demon on it, and the Deities and Demigods source book, that my mother freaked out. That was what got her to jump on the bandwagon of the Satanic Panic and to try to save my immortal soul, and decided to burn my games collection for the most part. Not all, there was a few that survived, but the majority of them were destroyed in a bonfire back of the house in the pasture, and I had to attend like some weird neon religion purification thing. And then within a few weeks later, my very religious and very eccentric grandparents, especially my grandfather, chastised my mother for doing that, because he was of the belief that this was some sort of political BS thing trumped up by the would-be TV evangelists of the day to generate, I don't know, revenue or something. And my grandfather was a very powerful individual in his own way, and very, very strong religious type in a very off-the-wall sort of way. He was the original fire and brimstone kind of guy. Would throw Bibles at 5-year-olds for sleeping in church. I know, because I was the target of one of those Bibles, and I'm just saying that's a different story for a different day. So my mother felt bad, gave me some money to restart my collection, and now it's a pretty extensive piece of property sitting in my house. All this stuff now, but that was then. So when I looked at the game books, the Deities and Demigods, for example, gave you a list of gods, major and minor, and their stats and their abilities, and what their equivalent levels would be if their quote human manifestation or avatar would show up on the prime material plane, and you had to be able to deal with them directly, potentially even interact or take them on. And so it was implied, and especially when I was younger, we pushed the envelope on that. How far can you advance a character? Well, the mechanics and the math are there, and the earlier stuff, and D&D wise, there was no ceiling. You could make a 300 level fighter at some point, though collecting the amount of experience points was just ridiculously high. And there was, at some point, you reached that plateau where you pretty much, there's nothing in the monster manual that your character and or group of characters can't eliminate or annihilate in a matter of seconds. And the powerful magic items are now artifact quality stuff and extreme powerful stuff, and you're no longer on that mortal plateau with everybody, with your peers. So what do you do? And the answer to this for the game designers was to come up with planular travel. This is where we could start actually moving amongst the heavens and the hells and all the alternate locations, and encounter even more powerful beasts and magical constructs and what have you, and so on, including the deities themselves. Now, a lot of games other than D&D, of course, offer similar takes on this, but not to the... I don't know of any that go to that extreme, to that expansive option. Now, I don't know all the game systems. I especially do not know very many of the latest, of the last 10 years, for example. But the current stuff, the older stuff, it makes me, Rune Master, you've got, Sword Sorcery, and... well, most of those are just clones of D&D, or just different versions of D&D. Like I said, Lord of the Rings, the role-playing game system, the Lord of the Rings has a different take on religion and a different take on the deities. The deities actually exist, and they're viewed by the elves basically as parents or elder teachers and what have you, and revered, but not in the same way that humans tend to revere the divine with these extreme cults of whatever. And it's not quite as clear cut as it is in other role-playing games. And that's because Tolkien didn't feel the need to go to that extreme. He spun up several stories other than the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits that include the creation of his universe, of his world, and the beings that helped sing it into existence, etc. So there is a different take on the religion. But anyway, that's my take on that, and I thought I wanted to get a little bit more out there and put it on my own channel for future people to laugh at, point fingers at, and debate. Till next time, game on, my friends, game on.